Welcome to the Military Transition Academy's PM Pathfinder series, where Max Rogers, former enlisted Marine turned naval officer and civilian energy industry project manager extraordinaire, teams up with the former Navy enlisted and Army officer candidate Eric Doc Wright, Vesta PM's founder and best-selling author, alongside Jeremy Burdick, a retired Air Force chief, aircraft mechanic and aviator turned civilian operations chief and process specialist for Vesta PM and the PDU University, bring you an audio-video suite to help you find the path while mentoring you in the profession of project management. Along the way, you can study for your CAPM, PMP, PMI, ACP, Scrum Master certifications, or just maintain your professional development units in a casual, enjoyable conversation between friends. All right. Well, welcome back for another episode of the PM Pathfinder. So happy to have you, Max. We're going to cover quite a bit of ground today. We'll try not to get too deep into some of the topics because I know that some of them are wave tops. We're going to start off with the overview of describing a purpose and importance of the cost, quality, risk, and schedule. So cost, quality, risk, schedule. We'll cover the importance of those real quick, and as we dive into it, but we don't have to drive into necessarily the how. It's more of the why. So let's start with cost. Why do we create like a cost baseline, a cost management plan, a performance baseline? So all those things that deal with cost, like what would you say is the main objective?
To ensure an understanding between the project stakeholders and the project team that you're completely aligned. I mean, sponsors can think something's going to cost X amount of dollars, and the project team does the cost estimate, and the two don't align. That's why it's important to put all of this information that you just talked about in the project charter. So it's in one single document. And like you said, high level, you don't have to go into all the explanation of how you develop this budget. You don't even have to go into all the spend plan, exactly how it's going. A lot of project charters, because a lot of companies are cash flow constrained, they want you to put in the project charter how much money you're going to need first quarter, how much you're going to need second quarter, how much you need third quarter, and as the project progresses, just so the financial management department can ensure there's enough cash on hand to fund the project. And but once again, whether it's scope, schedule, quality, risk, all these things, the top level information needs to be in your project charter. And that, to me, I discovered that was the fundamental and most important document of all the project management planning processes and outcomes that you had. The thing that I used the most, I used to, at the beginning of the project, I would take my project charter, I would print off 2 copies. One copy went in my 3-ring binder project notebook, and it was pristine at the end of the project. The other copy was my working copy. And at the end of a project, it was dog-eared, it had been folded, it had coffee stains all over, it had notes scribbled in the margins, and it was a well-used document. And it looked humble compared to the original printed one for the documentation purposes, but it was the one I used, and it was a testament to how often I used it.
No, that's great. No, I agree 100%. And I think, if you're not there for the charter, then make sure that stuff's in your cost management plan.
Yes.
Sure, you're talking over it, right? And I think what you said was really profound, is it's not necessarily for this tactical reason or this tactical reason. It's so that you're syncing up the stakeholders with the project team. It's expectation management
and alignment. That's that's the word I like to use is let's make sure we're all aligned here. And we all have the same expectations, and the definition of success and the definition of finish. When are we done? What does complete look like?
Absolutely.
And if you don't do that, then you can wind up. I was never involved in, but I witnessed projects that just went on forever that were
Right.
never closed out. And the reason they couldn't close them out is no one could agree on what was the finish line.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Definition of done is, that's the agile word. In the completion phase of a project in a predictive sense, if you don't define it, then you don't know, like you said, when you're done. What does a budget do? It helps you know if you're on, over, or under the budget. So it also helps, like you say, align that glide path towards really you're burning down your budget or you're increasing it to a certain goal. So I like that. I think that's really good. And then when you talk about, quality, what we typically say that's the meeting of requirements. So like you're building a bridge, right? Is it a bridge that I can drive a semi truck over, or extra heavy load, or to what standard do I get from point A to B? Those are meeting of those requirements, and then encased by stakeholder satisfaction. So in your mind, like the importance of a good quality management plan, what's some good examples that just kind of resound with you?
Well, what always paid dividends to me were an inspection plan and having inspection reports that were produced. A lot of the work, especially in the oil and gas industry, you're governed by numerous federal agencies, BSEE, the Offshore Management Organization, OSHA, all these things. And in order to ensure that you are complying with all the requirements, you have to collect the data, and then from the data, it morphs into information that you need to make management decisions about, are things right or are they not? And then from there, they transition into reports. And then these reports go out, and that becomes your documentation for your project. But it's having an inspection plan and more, that part of your schedule and part of your budget, because the thing, most inspections cost money. And so it's easy. You can track inspections through your financial documents or your task documents. And also a lot of times inspections are milestones, and you check those off as a milestone obtained, because I have a past inspection certificate here that says I'm complying with all the requirements and we're good to go. And especially in a linear type project plan where you're not an adaptive, but more where you're going stage gate controlled. You've got to get through that. That's what this documentation helps you.
Oh, I love it. So you brought up some really good points, and the PMBOK talks about, WPD, WPI, and WPR. And that's what Max was saying was, data goes into the information. And then, so raw data, project manager may or may not know what to do with it, right? Mm-hmm. We have 10,000 rivets. Well, that's great. 10,000 of a million, 10,000 of 10,000, very different equations. The information is when you put the context of, I have 10,000 of a million, right? And then the report, what's it look like on a spreadsheet, a pie chart or something, whatever an executive or a stakeholder could digest.
Exactly. And that's the benefit of taking information and turning it into reports, is you can take digital data and information and turn it into a visual presentation of a pie chart or a graph or a Gantt chart or something that, yes, that's what upper managers, CEOs and CFOs and COOs, they don't have time to read all the detail. They're looking at, and we always use color codes. We got green, yellow, and red. And as long as everything's green, they don't give it a second look. When it turns to yellow, they're going to want to know, okay, why did it go yellow? And give a brief explanation. When it's red or flashing red, then everybody's interest, and it becomes a fire drill. So, and that's how you call their attention to it also, is put things, color code things, and put things during a meeting, during a presentation, something pops up on the screen that's red. It's like, hey, there's an issue here. We need to talk about this. So.
Yeah, agreed. And it's something else that we talked about in a different episode is it's about the communication, right? And you're elevating the decision above yourself. You may not have the authority nor control to fix something that's red. So right. it's engaging all the stakeholders. What can you do to help me get this off of red? Right. And they're going to immediately feel that. They're going to sense that, like, we've got an emergency. Let's all get our big brains together. Obviously, that really brings us into what's the importance of risk management. Right.
Exactly. So, exactly. So, and to be honest with you, senior executives in a company, they're pulled in a million different directions, and every day their daily day activities are one fire drill after another. And unless it's red, it's not a fire. And it's if it's yellow, they assume that the people in charge, the project manager or the people beneath them, can handle it. It's not, they may notice it when it's yellow, but they're not getting involved when it's yellow. They get involved when it's red.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where you put, like, the boundaries, right? I can handle budgetary changes of this percent to this percent. Like, you put your bowling lanes in. If it hits the gutter, I got to engage the executive. That's red. Like, for me, yellow is, I got it, boss, but I want you to know that I've had to use my risk management plan with agreed upon risk responses. And I pulled it off the shelf. We dusted it off. We're in the emergency procedures. Got it. We got it. Goes red. I need outside help, kind of thing.
And that's why it's so important in your spending plan or in your cost plan that you specifically call out and designate who has the authority to spend up to a certain level of money. My first exposure to that was in the Navy, working for the federal government as a certified contracting officer for the government. While I was in, it was a 5 level. I understand now it's reduced down to 3, but at entry level, you could obligate the federal government for like $25,000. If you were a level 5, you had unlimited authority. You could sign a contract with a contractor for an unlimited amount of money. And of course, the people with that authority were very limited and very few and far between. But as you worked, you started out with a minimum level, at 25,000. So you could sign purchase orders, and you could buy office supplies, and you could buy those sort of things so that the ensigns and the JGs could handle all that stuff. But when you got up into the tens of thousands or even millions of dollars, you wanted to make sure it was middle grade officers or senior enlisted guys who had years of experience and knew that this was the right thing to do. The proper procedures were being followed and all that. And once again, we control that in the military by discipline and organizational structures. You control that in the civilian world by having spend plans and financial management plans and cost plans in your project. And that's how you control, because you don't have the rigid organizational structure in a project that you have in a military organization.
Yeah,
that's how you get the same effect.
I love how you tied that to the purpose and the importance of the budget, but it's also, is it meeting the requirement under the quality? Hey, if something goes bad, that ties into the risk. Let's talk schedule a little bit. Obviously, very similar to budget, because man hours count, timelines count. All this stuff matters. So, in a sense of a schedule, and I know you've told a couple stories before, but where do you think the purpose of the schedule, but more so the importance of having a really dialed in schedule?
Well, the schedule product that I used most was my schedule performance index that I use, because that way you can tell, if it's positive, I'm good. If it's negative, I'm bad. So once again, it's that collecting data, turning the data into information, and then putting the information into a report so that you understand it and it can go up and the people above you do. Schedule is because it can be depicted on a calendar or on a chart. It's a visual tool that everyone can see and everyone understands. But in the business world, time is money. And there is an easy way to designate your time as the cost. And for a project team, it's simple. You just take the members of your project team, you add up their hourly charge rate or their actual cost that they cost the company, and you put that all together and sum it up. And hey, if the project team spends a day doing this, this costs you X amount of dollars. I learned this principle of to avoid having excess meetings. Anyone who called a meeting, one of the requirements was they had to look at the people they invited to the meeting, look at their cost structure, and determine what was the cost of that meeting. Now, are you sure you want to meet for an hour, or are you going to, or can that meeting be conducted in half an hour? Because you've got to show the value of this meeting, and the way to turn time into value is add the dollars associated with the people's time to do it. And it always, then the number of meetings dropped off precipitously when people had to start justifying why you want to spend this amount of money.
Yeah, well, wonderful. And you think about it's that return on time investment.
Exactly.
If I've got 17 people in a meeting room, I'm likely not getting a bunch done. I'm telling, like I'm directing. I need 17 of you to go do this, right? But if it's a small, like collaborative meeting, you probably are getting a little bit more done. And if you've got a serious objective, like just for meetings management, right? You start on time. But day before, hopefully you get, what's the objective of the meeting? What am I trying to get? So that they can be thinking about it and coming up with ways to identify, discuss, and then solve the issues that are part of the objective. If there's no issues, why are you meeting? It could be done in a meeting, like an email.
Exactly. And the same way on that same meeting notification you send out, put what the expected outcome of the meeting is, whether it's an update to a plan, or whether it's a decision, or whatever it is. Make sure there are clear expectations there, so that everybody on the project team knows the purpose. And to use the example you just gave, you get 17 people sitting around a table for an hour. I don't care where you're working. That's a large amount of money. But if you reduce the time required in that meeting from 1 hour to a half hour, you just saved half of what you're going to, whatever the amount of money you were going to, what your cost was, it just got cut in half. Right. And, and there are ways that you learn effective to do that. Take the chairs out of the conference room. Let everybody stand. It's amazing how much quicker everyone can put out the information they need and receive the information they need when they're standing up, as opposed to when they're sitting down.
Oh man, it's a good tactic, right? Time saver.
Exactly.
If you can't get it done in 30 minutes, well, you probably aren't going to get it done in that meeting anyway.
Probably not. It's probably not the meeting is not the answer to the solution, or the solution to the problem. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think you brought up SPI. I love that. Positive number means you're doing good. You're ahead of schedule. Negative, and it's typically like 1.1 or right. negative 1 point or negative 0.9 or something like it. So you're within some kind of a boundary of schedule. And I like that forces you to do a little bit of math, but it immediately tells the project manager where you're at on performance. A lot of people like Gantt charts where, you stick it up against a calendar, these, right. Blocks. What you get there is duration of time per task, when it's supposed to start, when it's supposed to finish. You can get precedencing, I have to lay concrete before I frame, right? So and then I've got to have a lag in there because there's probably a cure time. So I know there's a lot of words that are coming out, vocabulary, but mm-hmm. ultimately, as you begin to study into the profession, project managers will sound like project managers. They're going to use those words. So study up.
Exactly. And another important term is trend analysis. That using an SPI, you annotate your SPI at the end of each week, and each month, whatever your reporting period is, and then you watch it. And if you're and during your project plan, the development of your project plan, you may state that you intend, the plan is to get ahead of schedule in the early days of the project, because as the project comes to a conclusion, there are things outside of your span of control that have to happen before you can complete the project, and you're probably going to be delayed. So you build some cushion into your schedule by getting ahead of schedule as much as you can, and then pay that back at the end when things are happening beyond. And that's all comes out of your risk register. but it's also available. It's a tool that you can use with your schedule planning also to accentuate your risk register and mitigation.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. You got a gas pedal that you can press or release a little bit, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And if you get ahead of schedule, you have a lot more opportunity to get under budget too, because that
Exactly.
means you can offboard workers. You can, you can do things, strategic things to help you deliver your project on time and on budget. So that's great advice. As we shift gears into distinguishing between the different deliverables of a project management plan versus a project or a product. So project management plan versus product management plan. I know we've got a lot of great information on project management plans and how many components, 19 different components that it should have, and we don't need to list them all out. But let's talk project management plan first, and then we'll swap over to the product management plan.
Well, the way I've always been able to keep the two separate in my mind is the project management plan is how you intend to do the work. The product management plan is the work. That's what you're actually doing, and that's what they wind up at the same place. The end of a project, you've produced this product, service, or whatever the goal, the objective of the project was, which is the product. So you get there at the same time, but then the product management plan, then if it's repetitive, okay, once you, if it's the first product you've ever made, the project management plan is very, very important to go through to document all the necessary processes and how we do this, measure our successes, define ways that we can improve, discover lessons learned, all these things. But once you get all that done, and once you actually get a product and you start making a product, then you sort of shift from into operations as opposed to project management, because it's no longer a project. When you're doing, making the same thing over and over and over and over again, then you move from the project into operations. And so it's, like I said, in my mind, it was always simple for me to look at it. Product management is the thing I'm making or what I'm doing, the service I'm providing. Project management is the way I'm going to get to that point to have that.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think we have said it a little bit before. It's like if you're discussing the how versus the what, and the how is like all the processes, the procedures, the techniques, the OPAs, the EIFs, and obviously some more words in there, but that you're going to utilize to get to the product management is more of that, the integration of all those processes, procedures, and objectives to create something. Like it's the tactical work within the production method, right? To put it quite simply, like if you had built a conveyor belt for an assembly line, that's project management. The physical Model T rolling on that's the product we're working on, right? We're integrating the conveyor belt, the workers, the screws, the guns, everything that they need, the paint is going onto that product as it rolls down. But that whole building, then the warehouse really is that project management. It's everything housed inside of it.
Right, exactly. And an easy way to determine which is which is look at the communication plan. In a project management plan, the communication plan is internal, mostly to the stakeholders, whereas in a product management plan, the communication is to the customers. It's an external communication. So it's those are two striking differences between the two.
Yeah, I like it.
The focus of your com plan.
Yeah, what wonderful way to use another portion of the project management plan to really see what are we doing product wise. So great technique. I will say, like the newest versions of the PMBOK, we'll talk about like the product environment, which is a little bit foreign for old project management, but it's like it's all about the teams, right? You're establishing these teams, you're using the incremental funding, and you're using program management to kind of couch the whole product development style. And even in the world, like corporate world today, you'll sometimes see job positions as product developer, product enhancement engineer, product manager. So it's just something to be aware of. Is there's a bit of a market shift of, hey, we don't develop projects around here, we develop products.
Right.
Well, how do we do those? Through project management. So
and if I was placed in a position as a product manager, the first thing I would do is go find the project management plan that was used to develop the product. That would be my starting point to develop my product management plan, would be the project management plan that got me to this point to produce the product.
Right. Yeah. And I guess you could say life cycle could be a little bit different, right? You've got a project that could be short duration, or a product could be very long duration. Like, I mean, if it's a flagship product of a company, they probably are going to keep doing it for long after the project is over. So timeline could really, play a factor.
Imagine the product management plan for Microsoft Project. I mean, I'm sure it fills up numerous volumes of what it, and I would be confident that the project management plan they use to develop Microsoft Project is still available, and it's probably on the same shelf as the product management plan.
Right. Absolutely. And probably dives into operational versus project, right? Because now you've got, support items, you've got repetitive checklist things, you've got bug fixes, which could be miniature projects,
right?
Because they're
temporary. The feedback loop.
Right.
It's
Beautiful.
It's all a feedback loop that comes back in for product enhancement and to avoid product obsolescence. Some products are designed to become obsolete, and then you go on to, because the company is going to offer you the next product. And that I've seen that in software. They, the purpose of a lot of software is to only get you to a certain point. And if that's as far as you're going, this is all you need. But once you get to that point, that software is not going to support your needs. But we have another product for you to purchase that will carry you the next step of the journey. So
yeah, well said. And you see companies like Apple, they produce a new iPhone every couple of years. It's designed to sunset so that you'll buy a new product. So a great way to bring that up.
But it still has to accommodate the old products. I mean, if Apple makes a new phone or comes up with a new system or a new operating system, it has to support the previous iPhones, at least back 2 or 3 generations.
Yeah,
because you're not gonna be able to sustain, in the marketplace, if you're making products that you have products that are still in the marketplace that are not being supported.
Yeah, agreed.
And you see Microsoft does that with their Windows updates. They just recently stopped supporting Windows 7, I think, up until, even though they're at 11 or 12 now, or some version way beyond 7, but they still, but 7 still works. If that's all you need, then fine, it's there.
Yeah, great point. Great example. As we shift, okay, let's talk a little bit about milestones and then task duration. So high level milestone doesn't have a time associated with it. Task duration does have time associated with it and work involved. But let's start with a milestone. Like, what's a good example of a milestone?
Well, a milestone is something that's definitive and that you can point to, and yes, we're there. We're at this point. It's like, if you're orienteering with the map out in somewhere in a countryside somewhere, you have to be able to orientate yourself. You have to find something on the map, and whether it's a tree or a crossroads, and that's a good example. So, okay, you're standing at that crossroads, you know where you're at. Okay, I'm on this journey. I made it to this crossroad. That's a milestone. And now the duration of my journey is not complete. I'm not at the destination yet, but I made this milestone. And now at this crossroad, I have to make a choice. I go left or I go right. And I've got my plan and my directions, and this is what I follow. But milestone, it's important to place milestones along your schedule so that you you know that definitively that you are making progress. There are some instances where it's important to place milestones at the end of a task. There are some times it's appropriate to put a milestone in the middle of a task, especially if that task is dependent upon numerous other tasks that have to be completed before you can complete this task. Then once they're all completed, that could be a milestone in the task that you're going, because at least I know there that everything prior that's required has been done.
Yeah.
Another importance of milestone that I learned from an organization I was working in is that that's a great opportunity to have a celebration. And they're one of the super major oil companies in the world. They are eminent about project managers celebrating milestones. They want milestones to be identified. They want them to be used as goals. And then when those goals are obtained, they want you to celebrate that with taking the project team out to lunch, have a cocktail party, get in a conference room and invite the senior executives to come down, the project sponsor or whatever, and to make a spiel, to give out awards for performance awards and things like that. But I didn't realize the opportunity that existed with milestone attainment and it's a very important part with managing your project team as far as the morale of your project team. It makes them feel appreciated. It makes them know that their efforts are being observed, number one, and that they're appreciated and they're celebrated. And so, a piece of paper just with a letter of appreciation or an accomplishment certificate of some kind, it's very inexpensive to produce, but it buys you a lot of goodwill with the person that you give it to, and especially if it's truly earned. So, and I'm no advocate of giving participation trophies to everyone, but I had the good fortune of most of the members of my project teams wanted to be on my project team. They wanted to do a good job, and most of them excelled in their positions. And I constantly was on the lookout of how I could reward them and acknowledge their performance. And a milestone attainment is an excellent time to do that.
Wow. I never know which direction you're going to go, but I love it because you never think about a milestone from a perspective of it's a celebration, right? It's putting a stick in the sand or a flag and saying, hey guys, we just did this. We just got past one of 4 of milestones and we should celebrate that. It's motivation for your team, like you said, but it's also communication to stakeholders. Like
it is.
They don't have to figure out this long schedule with red and yellow. They can simply say, hey, I'm 1 out of 4. That means we're doing pretty good, right? Yes. Okay.
As long as you're no more than a quarter of the way through your schedule and a quarter of the way through your budget. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point. So
yeah. So it's a great communication tool. It's a great motivation tool. And it's a really good high-level executive review of what you just did. And I really like that you brought in too with a milestone could be in the middle or even in the beginning of a task, because if you're waiting on an inspection, like a building code inspection, or, hey, a master electrician needs to go look, we can't drywall over it before the master electrician goes and checks. So that could delay a task. So let's talk about task duration a little bit as we kind of transform. A milestone is not a task, but there's no duration with milestones, but there are with tasks. So let's talk just a little bit on duration.
Okay, and when you're planning the project, you sit down and when you're developing your work breakdown schedule and work breakdown system and putting all these things together, developing the discovering the work that needs to be accomplished, breaking that work down to the smallest levels that you can you can foresee anyway, and then establishing durations. But and those durations, you have to always stay focused on. The duration is directly proportional to the amount of resources that you are able to apply to the work that has to be done. So it's in a manufacturing facility. or in a manufacturing environment, scheduling durations is fairly simple. Everybody comes to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, they clock in, they go to their machine, and they start working. On a construction site, durations are much more difficult to obtain or to stick to or to discover, because it can be weather dependent. It could be, there could be the duration could be dependent upon material delivery. It could be, it's dependent upon the workers you have, the resource. If we just, in this pandemic that we just gone through, 6 guys, you got a 5-man crew, and 3 guys don't show up because they're sick with COVID. That's going to impact your duration of the activity. You got to put a roof on a house, and you still, just because 3 guys didn't show up for work doesn't absolve you of putting the roof on the house. The difference now in the duration is I only got 2 people to put the roof on, whereas I planned the duration to have 5 people. So you need to, number one, document the lack of resource, and use that to explain the change in the duration. But then you have to sit down and put your project manager hat on and determine, okay, now what's the impact of this change in duration, and how is it going to impact the further processes or activities that are on downstream from this. Hopefully you've got your activities and tasks broken up so they diverge to some level, so that a delay in one area doesn't delay the entire project, and you can keep making progress, and you figure out a way then to go back and make up that lost time or that extended duration in one activity later on as you're going on. But the whole project doesn't come to a halt just because I only got 2 roofers as opposed to 5 roofers. So
yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but what Max is kind of laying out is the critical path.
Right, exactly.
So if you have a critical path and this task requires this task, then that's your shortest distance, right? And if you don't build buffer in between those and something happens, guess what happens to your end date? Expected end date or closure date, boom, delivery date, always push to the right. You can't do anything about it.
Exactly. Direct correlation. Any change or any extension of a duration on the critical path moves the completion date out the same number of days.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's like a hard law of
that's why it's called the critical path. It is the critical path.
Yeah. I know some techniques you can do, some crashing or some fast tracking and utilize resources, and that's our very next topic. And I agree. I just want to point out one thing that you said. It does depend on the people. So if you have 6 and 3 show up, well, what if those 6 are all rookies?
Exactly.
So you've also got a skill problem, right? And you may need to look at your resources and talk to the functional managers and get at least a couple A quality, a couple B quality, and a couple C quality individuals that can produce, so you have more of an average work rate.
Well, that's why, Jeremy, I always took it upon myself every time I started somewhere new in a new organization. Of course, the first place you go is the HR office. Well, that's an excellent opportunity to develop a relationship with people in the HR office. And as a project manager, when you're standing up a project, those are the people that can tell you who's available, how much time, what the skill level is of these people. They actually have copies of their resumes, and they have CVs for these people. They have all this information. So it's part of the relationship building that a project manager needs to constantly be doing. Is don't waste, and I advise all young project managers, is your first day in that company, when you're sitting there with the HR, the person in the HR department, take that opportunity to develop a relationship with that person in the HR department, because you can't get anything accomplished by yourself. It depends on your project team. Well, your project team comes out of the information you use to set up your project team. Is all that information resides in the human resources department. And it's one-stop shopping. You can go to and get all that information about the talent within your organization. You can also discover the talent that you don't have within your organization and go, okay, I've got to have an alternative method. I'm going to have to contract out for these tasks because we don't have the skills in-house to do this. And by going through the HR department, when you go to your boss and request the additional funds or the change order in order to contract this out, you tell them right up front, hey, I've already been to HR and we've sat down and discussed this. The good thing to do is bring the HR manager with you in tow and say, yeah, we don't have this skill sets within the company. The only way we don't need it, that there's no reason to hire someone in this field because this is a one time off. What we need to do is contract for this work.
Yeah. Wow.
Benefits you.
And you think about that when we talk about determining the number of type of resources in a project, that is completely aligned with that. That's one of the best first stops, like you said, is go find out what resources we have. The better question is, what resources don't we have so that we know what number we need to bring on and what types of resources, because a resource can really be the two major categories is material or human, right? I mean, that's the two major ones. There's some others out there, but with respect to that, what do you use like as a good technique to determine some of the number of resources that you might need? Other than obviously you just used a great example of go to the HR.
Well, the way you determine what resources you need, the way I do it anyway, is I take my WBS and I analyze what the actual task is. If you're, let's take the example of building a house. Framing, you need carpenters to build a house. Okay. But a framing carpenter, when you're just putting up, nailing 2x4s up, and doesn't have to have the skill level that your finished carpenter, the guy putting in the cabinets, putting the trim work in, using a miter saw and making reverse bevels and cuts and stuff like this. A framing carpenter, usually he's just taking a handsaw or a skill saw and making a straight cut. So it's a different, even though they still fall under the category of carpenter, there's a real difference between a framing carpenter and a finished carpenter. And you have to break your tasks down to enough granular level that you know what task is really what skill level is required. The same way in an IT department. There are so many different IT languages or computer languages that are out there today, and development languages, the way to do it. Just having a guy who's got 5 years experience working in IT doesn't mean he knows C++ or I found myself one time working in an organization that still used Fortran, one of the original computer, and we had to go find someone because of this program we were using. And it came out, we found this 68-year-old gentleman who had been retired for several years, but he would have been an original Fortran programmer. And with a little bit of dusting out his books, he got his skill set back up to operating level. And we brought this guy in and to do this, use this in IT terminology, an ancient computer program. And but it worked out just fine. But without knowing, just thinking that, okay, I need 5 IT guys. Well, one of those guys needs to know this, specific language. So it's important. And the only way you get that is by granular detail of the task.
I love it. I love it. And what you're really defining is the PMBOK word decompose.
Right.
You're taking the WBS house and then you're breaking it down. Okay, I need walls, I need a roof, I need framing, I need foundation, I need a site survey, I need, these are all these big needs. And then even those can be broke down into further. I would ask, so as you continue to break it down, have you seen it ever get broke down too far? Like, is there a time where you're like, okay, I want standard work rates, like at a minimum 4 hours or 8-hour shifts or something like that? Have you ever seen it broken down too detailed?
It can get, yes, I have. And it's when you have an abundance of resources. And the simplest way to explain it is if someone hands you $1,000 in $20 bills, and you're walking down the street, happy with your good fortune, and you're counting your money, and you're on a windy day, and one of those $20 bills blows out of your hand and blows down the street, how much effort are you going to put into going and retrieving that one $20 bill because you've got a fistful of them? Whereas the opposite is, if they only gave you $100 and you had five $20 bills, and you're walking down the street and something happens and one blows out of your hand, that one $20 bill is a lot more important to you than a $20 bill is if you've got, 50 of them. And so the same way is when you get in a large organization where there's all kinds of people, all kinds of personnel resources, things get sloppy, and they just go down to the in the Navy we used to call it the nuke level. You're nuking this out. It's not necessary. One of the greatest lessons I received is, I was in we were on an exercise in Turkey, building a K-span building, an expeditionary aircraft maintenance building for the Turkish Air Force. The foundation was pretty simple. You just dig a trench and put a rebar cage in there. I was down in this trench with a tape measure and trying to get the cage set up exactly to the right dimensions to have 2 inches of cover on each side. And I was spending all this time, and I happened to stop and I glance up, and my ops chief was standing up outside of the trench with his hands on his hip, and he looked at me and he goes, "Lieutenant, we ain't building a piano here." And I immediately, I knew exactly what he meant. And so I crawled out of the ditch and said, "Pour the concrete." He goes, "That's the right answer." And so you have to, I use that every day in my life. When it comes to a decision, I ask, am I building a piano or am I building a plywood box? What am I building here? What's the point? And how much effort are you going to put into it? So it's the same way when you start analyzing resources and durations and putting together a schedule. I mean, that's the thing I enjoy so much about, and I'm not trying to push a product here, but Microsoft Project. It is such a great tool, because if you just want to make a Gantt chart and show, hey, I'm starting this project today, I'm going to end it next Thursday, I got 4 people, that's the resource I'm going to use, it's going to cost me $10,000, and here you go, here's the project schedule, the project budget, everything all on one piece of paper, go get the boss to sign off on it, you got it, you're ready to go to work. You can take that same computer program, if you've got a 6-year project that you're going to have 10 million man hours invested on, and you can break it down and blow this thing up and make it into a volumetric schedule as far as the number of pages are concerned. And it's the same tool. It's Microsoft Project. So it all comes down to pick the right tool to do the job. And same way with resources. Pick the adequate number of resources, pick the right resources to do the job. And in most cases, one size doesn't fit all. As you gain more experience, you learn what you really need. Sometimes you're in a point of discovery. You got to figure out what you need. I was working on a project in the Navy where we made a new autonomous vehicle, and we were trying to figure out what rate of sailors we should train to do this. And we were spending weeks struggling over what to do. And I got hungry and went down to the bowling alley to get a sandwich in the snack bar. And I happened to notice there was an arcade room there. And I saw these young sailors, and they're playing these video games. And that video game was very similar to the control system for this autonomous vehicle that we were developing. So I went in and started asking, hey, what's your rate? One guy was a corpsman. One guy was an aviation technician. One guy was a bosun's mate. And they were all equal on this game. So I went back, my message back to the group that I was in is, hey, we're looking at the wrong thing here. We don't need to look at a rate. We need to look at a skill set. Go find sailors who play video games.
Yeah.
That's the, and then but that's the rate I mean, if you want to be a SEAL today, they have a source ratings. You can come from all different ratings in the Navy and go into special warfare. And then once you go through SEAL training, then you become special warfare operator. But until then, I mean, there's bosun's mate, there's hull technicians, there are aviation machinist mates. There's all kind of rates can feed into special warfare, but then you become a special warfare operator. So
yeah, great example.
So
great example of skill sets and feeding into aptitude, appetite, and attitude. I mean, it all begins to really start to congeal into, hey, do I have the right resources? Do I have enough resources? And I really love the story of the $20. Right. Because if you got $1 million, $20, that's a rounding error.
Yep.
You got $100. Wow, that's an impact. You just lost a fifth of your budget. So I love that. And I think to the decomposing portion, you bring it down to an impact of work. That's your work package, your lowest level. And then you have activities that are on your activity list, but your work package should be down to your lowest level, and it should contain 100% of the work that you're planning. So,
and my goal was always get it down to the level it doesn't matter anymore. Whenever you get down, keep coming down your herringbone decision tree. When it gets down to, okay, do I go left or right? When the answer is it doesn't really matter, then stop. You're far enough, because if you're down to the level that there is no impact, to use the word that you've been using, then it doesn't matter, and you're just wasting time. You're spending money to make a decision that's irrelevant. So
right.
Don't do
you can plan too much, right? If it's a 1 month project and you spend 3 weeks planning, you may have chewed up too much time. And I do believe in the, if you're going to go chop down a tree and it's going to be a day, spend the first 6 to 8 hours sharpening the axe. Got it. It's a great Abraham Lincoln, adage. However, you can plan too much for a short duration project.
I had an old project manager tell me one time that the proof that you don't need PMI processes is the fact that Noah built the ark without them. So he said, he goes, imagine how long it would have took Noah to build an ark, if he followed, modern project management processes.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. I dig that.
But if he'd done the proper documentation, maybe we'd know where it was at today. So.
That's right. So we covered our topics today. We hit it in about an hour for everybody out there that's going to be listening. And I really appreciate you tuning in and playing, Max. What else? Anything else that you want to add to the discussion before we wrap it up?
I think you covered all the topics very well. And once again, I thank you for having me on. I enjoy it. And, I hope the next generation of project managers that this is valuable to them, and, that they benefit from them, and they can take the lesson. This is sort of like closing a project, doing the lessons learned portion of it. And there's a lot of knowledge out there that you can pick up by tuning into podcasts like this, and a lot of experiences, a lot of scars, on us old project managers, but hopefully there's some good lessons to be obtained from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. When you mess up even a little bit, and you say, well, I could have optimized. I'm a refiner by nature. So I always look at a process like after I've done it, it's like, doggone it. If I would have just done this instead of that at that moment, that would have changed everything. So I love that you're bringing this up as really as a lessons learned. I mean, exactly. We want you to prep and learn beforehand, but also this is our lessons learned from a lifetime of doing and getting, like you said, the battle scars. So really cool resource, and I love having you. I learn from you every episode, so it's really pretty valuable to have you.
Well, it's the same way. It's a two-way street, because I've never met anyone or involved with anyone who's more fluent in the PMBOK than you are. I mean, to the point of quoting paragraphs and sections. So that's great. It's nice that I hope the people who are out here using this as a training resource realize how valuable it is having someone with your experience in the PMBOK, and especially because even though regardless of what your desire may be to be an effective and maybe even a top ranked project manager, first wicket is to get through the PMP, is to pass the PMP. And you pass the PMP by becoming, gaining knowledge in the PMBOK and using the content that's out there that is going to be tested on you. And once you get the PMP certification, then the learning starts. The
That's
learning
right.
of how, this is the process to get you to the starting gate. And then you go on and have a very successful and lucrative career in the project management world.
That's right. Milestone number 1, PMP
Exactly.
certificate.
Exactly. Get your PMP. That should be the first milestone, and celebrate it.
All right. Well, great. We'll see you guys next episode, and we'll bring Max back and have some more great conversations. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the PM Pathfinder series and want to join the profession, certify, or maintain your PDUs by visiting vetstapm.com and looking up Project Manager Essential Toolbox or a bootcamp.